Welcome to another episode of A Life Worth Living.
What is the common thread that connects us all?
Sometimes we feel alone and we believe that we are the only person on earth who could possibly feel this way.
But maybe we all have more in common than we think.
So, we're asking for people's point of view to talk about their experiences in an attempt to better ourselves and find the common thread that connects us all. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Anaheim Stoneworks and Masertati LA Training Center. Today's guest is a university professor, a leader and success coach, and the author of The Wisdom of Walt, Leadership Lessons from the Happiest Place on Earth. I hope you enjoy our talk with Dr. Barnes about the many life lessons that Walt Disney can teach us. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, man.
Thank you.
We're really looking forward to this. I was getting to read a lot of your stuff and look at your bio, and it seems very intriguing. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you and more about your book as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I actually watched an interview that you did, and you talked about encouraging your students to live their best, or to write their own story and to live their best possible lives.
Yes.
And that's really related to positive psychology.
Absolutely.
So how do you think that people can do that?
Well, I think we have to sort of look back on our life in terms of narrative. And, if you think about what makes for a great story, there's characters, there's detail, there's transitions, there's conflict. And if you go back and you look in your past, you're going to find all of those there. The challenge is if you don't like the story that you're living, then what I say to my students is get busy editing.
Yeah.
Right? Choose a different path. And, typically what happens is, and, it's sort of interesting when you talk about Disneyland opening 60 years ago now. Walt built the park for the purpose of telling stories. He wanted most to be remembered as a storyteller. And
what do you mean by that? Can you explain that as far as how you utilize that as telling the stories?
There were amusement parks, but there weren't theme parks. And Walt wanted to build something that would be a living, breathing, organic story-making machine.
Got it.
And so, from the very beginning, a guest experience in the old parking lot was really constructed to simulate the outer lobby of a movie theater.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so he intentionally dressed the parking lot attendants like movie ushers, and they were directing you not to your seat, but to your parking stall. And if you think about it, for most of us, when we go to park somewhere, it's really a pain.
Yeah.
Walt made it a part of the experience. He made it a part of the story. When you come up to the gates, in fact, next time you're at Disneyland, look at your feet as you stand there in front of the floral Mickey. You'll notice that the bricks are red. Well, Walt, of course, was most frequent in telling stories in Hollywood. And, the color red, of course, evokes the idea of red carpet treatment. Walt wanted every guest to feel like they were a VIP, that they were the star of their own story at Disneyland. And then, you have to choose either going left or going right. And people are very passionate about this. I have students in my class, their family only ever enters in through the right, or they only ever exit out through the left. Well, it's not so much about whether you choose right or left. The point of all of that is Walt wanted to remind us of the importance and significance of stage left and stage right. He talked about it as if it's Alice in Wonderland stepping through the looking glass. In other words, when you walk into Disneyland, you're stepping into the story. And everything was built with a storybook element to it.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, you think about how many times we've gone to Disneyland, and just looking at what you said, the parking lot itself, from the tram ride you take over to when you stand there, the whole experience. But I never looked at it like that. It's a totally different perspective. That's unreal.
So I have a question going back to the students and rewriting their story. How can someone begin to do that, especially if they have maybe a traumatic story and they're stuck on that, they're fixated on it? How can they begin to rewrite it so that it's better and more positive?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, we all love story. It's why we read books. It's why we keep going to the movies. I believe it's why we keep going to Disneyland. Disneyland doesn't have rides, it has attractions, and those attractions are there for the purpose of telling some sort of story, and we connect with those stories, and we feel very emotional about those stories. Well, if you think about what makes for a good or a great story, it requires conflict. And the challenge in living a great life is, more often than not, we want a great story. We want nothing to do with conflict. You know, when we hear the word conflict, when we know conflict is brewing, when we know that we're facing conflict, typically we want to run in the complete opposite direction. Yeah. And I think what Disneyland is telling us is not only do we love great stories, but we have the opportunity to live a great story. And one of the ways we do that is by embracing conflict, by welcoming conflict, by saying, you know what, there are no great stories without great dragons. And the bigger the dragon, the bigger and better the story. And so whatever you have in your past, we probably wish that it hadn't happened, but if you start thinking about it in terms of narrative and in terms of plot line and conflict resolution, and I think most importantly, recognizing every story needs a lead. Every story needs a hero. In fact, going back to the opening day of Disneyland, the best stories when the park opened were told in the Fantasyland dark rides. And those originally were Snow White, Scary Adventures, Peter Pan's Flight, and Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And in fact, in celebration of the 60th anniversary, Disneyland actually focused on those original dark rides because they go really to the heart of the park's history and when it opened. Well, as much as the public loved Disneyland when it first opened, when they went into Fantasyland and they rode those original dark rides, they were actually a little bit confused because when they rode Peter Pan, they were looking for Peter Pan. When they rode Snow White, they were naturally looking for Snow White. When they rode Mr. Toad, they were looking for Mr. Toad. Walt intentionally left the lead characters or the heroes out of those stories in the Fantasyland dark rides because he believed that he wanted the guests to ride those attractions from the perspective or point of view of the lead character.
That's interesting.
Of the hero.
Genius, man.
Yeah, and so, eventually they were so tired of people asking about it that when they redid Fantasyland in 1983, they finally added in Snow White and Peter Pan. That might fix the problem at Disneyland. Doesn't fix the challenge in our own life. We can't sit around and wait for a lead character. We can't sit around and wait, for a hero. And so, whatever your story is, whatever your dream is, someone has to step up, and that person is you.
That's what has happened, I know, for my life, and I think for you as well. I mean,
yeah,
all my
absolutely.
personal experiences, everything I've gone through, I've utilized for my whole career path now.
It's part of your narrative.
By that, I've also found what I've loved, and it's not, it doesn't become work.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep.
Good, man. I love that. I have a question, random. Looking at, just kind of stuff with Disney, we were slowly touching on it earlier about this, about, how Walt, especially when he was around, the movies and the characters and stuff, it seemed like there was a lot more negativity in some of the cartoons, whereas nowadays there's no conflicts and stuff. You were starting to tell me about that. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that more, because I find that very interesting as to what you were telling me.
Yeah, Walt, had a pretty vast, film library that he was responsible for throughout his career, and it wasn't uncommon for him to get complaints from the public and from parents. Why did you kill this character off? Why did this particular incident or conflict happen? And he was very upfront, as childlike as he was, and as positive, as optimistic as he was. He recognized that life has dark shadows, and he believed that children needed to be exposed to that. And to some degree, he actually believed that it was necessary for us to fail and to go through some dark periods in our life because we ended up better on the other side. And so it wasn't necessarily something to be avoided, but rather something to be embraced. And so he didn't shy away from it. He only ever made a G-rated movie, but those G-rated movies reflected real life, meaning, there was conflict and there were some dark shadows and, there were some not fun things happen, which is what real life is all about.
Go ahead.
I think that touches on resilience, really. It's part of being resilient, and Walt was a very resilient person.
Yep.
Do you think that him displaying that in the movies and his life story is what got him so successful?
Yeah, he had way more failures and way more challenges than he actually did, successes. And we sort of forget that today. So, for example, he went bankrupt in Kansas City before he ever came out to California. His very first successful character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, was actually sort of stolen away from him by Universal and a middleman by the name of Charles Mintz. And it was in that moment, you talk about resiliency, he's come out to California with nothing. He has a suitcase and $40. They start the Disney studio. They come up finally with a successful character in Oswald the Rabbit. So successful that he and his wife Lillian in 1927, 1928 get on a train back to New York, and they want to negotiate higher fees in terms of distribution because the character has been so successful. And in that meeting, Walt would come to learn that, A, Universal is taking the character away from him.
Wow.
And B, while he's been in New York, Universal's been busy in California stealing away the very animators who had drawn the character and helped make Oswald so successful. Now, I don't know about you guys. If that had happened to me, I would be texting my shrink. I'd be on the phone with my attorney.
Yeah, of course.
Walt didn't do anything that we would do in 2015. He sent a telegram back to his brother Roy in California and said, everything is great.
Really?
Don't worry about a thing. Yeah. And on the train ride back, he got busy. He knew that he needed something fast if he was going to save the studio. And he remembered a little mouse that had populated his barren office there in the struggling studio in Kansas City. And you may have heard of that mouse because we know him today as Mickey Mouse.
Oh,
and
boy.
If Walt had not failed...
He's such a creative guy.
Yeah, if Walt had not failed, if he had not gone through that experience with Universal, if he had not been resilient, we wouldn't have Mickey Mouse today.
That goes back to the two things. I mean, because for me in my life, with success, off the top, I've never seen any successful people that haven't failed.
Absolutely not.
Haven't seen any of them. So
yeah, we want to be protected, we want to be shielded, but that's not real life.
Yeah.
And there are no great stories unless they're a great big drag.
So you teach a class on the history of Disneyland, which is amazing. And this book, I think, is really helpful. You said there's a lot of different exercises in there that people can use.
Yes.
How do you incorporate this into the class? Do you do that?
Well, the class has been going for a couple of years now, and it really is a history of Disneyland class. And what I try to do is show students how the history of the park really reflects American history and American culture, from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and, of course, now into the 2000s. But also at the same time having a vision for the way in which Walt's story and the story of the park can challenge and motivate and inspire all of us to live a great life and to live a great story. But in terms of the class, it's history first, and then success and inspiration and motivation in terms of our own history and our own story second. The book is really the opposite, and what I mean by that is I wrote the book to show how the park is challenging us to be an awesome version of our own selves, to be our own hero, to step up and be our own lead character. But also the idea that before Walt there was no such thing as a theme park. He had been successful in all of these other areas, but now he's got this crazy idea of building merry-go-rounds and roller coasters 33 miles south of Los Angeles in Anaheim, what was then the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. People literally, to include Art Linkletter, one of his best friends who does the opening day broadcast, they thought he was delusional. They thought he had lost his mind. His wife, Lily, was against it. His brother, Roy, his partner, all of them were completely against it. They just didn't get it.
Really?
What got him to keep going? Why did he move forward despite everyone thinking that he's crazy and telling him it's never going to work?
Well, when Universal took Oswald away from him, he said, you know what, I must be onto something if they want it that badly. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of inspired, that confidence that you all need if you're going to be, successful. And then, once Mickey Mouse was successful, he always wanted to push the envelope technologically. Walt didn't believe in sequels. He always wanted to do, what was next. he successful with Mickey Mouse. Now he wants to do the world's first full-length animated feature film. Again, Lily didn't believe in it. Roy didn't believe in it. He runs out of money. He has to, get bankers to believe in it, which was a tremendous challenge. And then, after that is done, fast forward, to the mid to late 1940s, he's a father. And, he has a couple of daughters, Diane and Sharon, and, he would always carve out time to spend with them on the weekend, what he would refer to as Daddy's Day. And they would go to, various locations here in Southern California. And the girls' favorite, there was a merry-go-round, still is there today in Griffith Park. Yeah. And he would put them on the merry-go-round because they like to ride it, 30 times in a row. And he would sit on a park bench eating peanuts. And while that merry-go-round was spinning one day, his own mind began to spin about a place where parents and children could have fun together, and it would be a place where stories were told, and it would be themed, and it would be clean and attractive, and very different from anything else that existed in the world. And that's where his idea and his dream was birthed. And interestingly enough, the more people who told him it couldn't be done, the more people who told him that he was going all about it the right way, it simply resolved him that this is exactly what the world needed. And boy, did it connect with us.
Yeah, it did. Jeez.
Yeah, that's definitely some self-confidence right there.
Yeah.
So I have a question. You have a chapter in the book that's all about pursuing your passion. And you actually talked about that you just started this course, I think, last summer?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
But you told us that you actually had a brain tumor. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, Walt's dream on a park bench was, to build this place called Disneyland. For whatever reason, I had this dream for several years of teaching a university-level course on the history of Disneyland. Not because it's about an amusement park or roller coasters, because, again, I think that story and that history is so rich and so motivational and so inspirational. I really wanted to use that history as a vehicle for connecting with students today and really inspire them toward their own dreams and their own level of success. But, of course, the same, thought mechanism that gives us these great ideas also produces that inner voice and that inner critic that says, oh, that's stupid, people will laugh at you. And so, I would think and I would dream about putting this course together, but I also knew that if I went to the gatekeepers at the university, the administration, and said, hey, let me teach a course on the history of Disneyland, they'd laugh me right off of campus. I figured it'd be a fast pass to the unemployment line, quite frankly. And, I didn't want to be the professor on campus that was known for pitching a Mickey Mouse course, if you will. And,
that's your legacy.
Yeah, exactly. And so really out of self-doubt and fear, didn't pursue it. And then eventually what happened...
How much time went by?
2-3 years.
Okay.
And then what happened, we had just had graduation at CBU, and I was getting ready to come home the first day of summer when, things are shutting down and they're starting to get a little quieter. And I was thinking about all the things I wanted to get done during the slower summertime. And one of them was, oh, yeah, this would be a really good time to, work on that class some more. And I was, distracted in my thinking as I was getting in my vehicle and started to accelerate onto the 91 freeway. And suddenly I heard a noise. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and my iPhone was doing cartwheels down the shoulder of the freeway. No. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not a fun moment. And so I raced up the first exit, jumped across, back on the other side, back across again. And, Jason, before I ever came across my iPhone, I also found something else that was painfully familiar. I had not just left my iPhone on the roof of my car, I had left my iPad as well. And so I stood there. I stood there on the shoulder of the freeway that afternoon during rush hour with all of these cars racing by.
Oh, no.
And it was just one of those moments of clarity where I realized those aren't cars, those are my dreams and my goals and my visions because of my distracted thinking and my own fear just racing past me. And so I made the decision that day that there wasn't going to be another day that went by that I didn't work on pursuing that course and making it a reality. And come to find out, we build up all of these fears and doubts in our own mind. Well, lo and behold, the main person that I needed a yes from, when he was a student at USC back in the day, he worked as a cast member at Disneyland.
Oh, that's an easy sell.
Exactly, running the old Davy Crockett Explorer canoes. I like to tell the story, it tipped the odds in my favor.
Yeah.
And so he thought it was a great idea and, approved it almost immediately. So that meant I then had an entire year to put the syllabus together, the curriculum, the textbooks, line out the field trips, guest lecturers, and, finally a year later, interestingly enough, a year to the day that I ran over my electronics on the 91 was the day that I got to give the very first lecture in the history of Disneyland class. And, I had in my head what it would be, but it was actually, way better than even I had imagined. And then going to your question, the following day I had an appointment with a neurosurgeon, and they diagnosed me with a brain tumor.
Oh, no.
And
crazy.
Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking, okay, well, maybe this is like a watch and see situation, or, worst case scenario, they'll do brain surgery in the morning, I'll be back in the classroom in the afternoon.
I would be freaking
He's so
out,
optimistic, dude. I love it. I love it.
And so when you come across an outpatient brain surgery clinic in about 50 years, it was my idea back in the summer of 2014. But, he said, this is life-threatening and it needs to come out. Today's Friday. I want you back here on Tuesday. And I said, well, how long will I be out? And he said, best case scenario, 6 to 8 weeks. And I knew immediately that, that meant no class.
What was your response back to that?
Not going to happen. And trust me, neurosurgeons are not accustomed to being told no.
No,
they typically get their way.
Well, I'm sure most people don't.
Most people, yeah. Especially when there's a brain tumor, Yeah. I mean, something obviously very severe and serious.
Yeah, and so he wanted to know, well, what are you doing that's so important that you're willing to risk your own life and put off brain surgery? And I said, well, I'm a doctor too. And I teach at a university, and he's like, well, yeah, but it's summertime, what does that matter? And I said, well, I'm teaching a summer class, and he goes, well, get someone else to teach it. And that's when I shared with him, this wasn't just any other summer class, and I couldn't just get any other professor, to teach it. Well, then, of course, he specifically wanted to know the exact class that I was teaching. When I said History of Disneyland, he nearly fell out. I thought he had a brain tumor. He was really, really sort of put out with me and this whole situation. But it was really in that moment when I realized that I was willing to risk my own life to teach this course that I truly came to understand this matters to me.
Well, I think, this
means something. This is my passion. Yeah. And, the good news is, we didn't have the surgery in May. We managed to get through the entire course. There was
congratulations.
Thank you.
Dude, give me some. That's impressive.
And we had the surgery on July 24th of 2014, and here we are a year later. Never been healthier.
A year later, that's
quite frankly. And
did you say the 24th?
Yeah.
I'll never forget that date, man. You're 1 year for your surgery, and so on after 1 day after my sobriety birthday.
Yep, I love it.
That's perfect.
So now we've taught the class 2 summers now, and when we got through onto the other side of it, I realized that this wasn't just a class, but it was also a book. Not everybody can attend California Baptist University. Not everyone can register for the course. We cap it at 20, quite frankly.
Oh, small.
Yeah, and so, I realized, that there was a message here that was bigger than just the history of Disneyland or, bigger than just the students that I could put in a classroom. And so, really sort of pushed and challenged myself to turn that dream into not just a course, but really a book.
Well, now everyone can get a piece of it.
That's unbelievable. You took something, obviously it had such an, I didn't even realize how, I knew it was a big deal that Disneyland was around, but how much it really had an impact on our day-to-day stuff. And the whole purpose behind it. That's genius on your part. I'm going to start calling you Walt. To be able to find that stuff out there, that's phenomenal. I can't wait to finish, reading. I was able to skim through some of the stuff. I had one more question on my end. I wanted to ask you, I noticed through the book, and something I actually landed on, it talks about the 4 C's. Mm-hmm. Can you just touch on that and what those are?
Walt, as he got older in life, was asked a lot of questions about success and, how did you get to where you are and, what does it take, to be a successful person? And, he summed it up in what he called the 4 C's. And the 4 C's are curiosity, confidence, courage, and consistency. And then he went on to say, out of those 4, far and away, confidence, in his opinion, is the most important. And a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, I think we mistakenly think that when we're successful, then naturally we'll be more confident. It's the other way around. Mm-hmm. You have to act with confidence. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your dream, and then the success will follow.
Can people get that mixed up with ego?
Well, you can, but here's the deal. If you think your dream is about being right, if you think your dream is about being 100% successful all the time, then it is going to be about your ego, and you're going to get deflated very, very quickly. I like to say success, especially if you're a leader or an entrepreneur, success is like the architecture in Toontown. There are no straight lines.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and I wish you the best of luck with this class and everything. Much. It's so amazing.
We're gonna you guys have to check out the book.
Yeah.
It's I can tell you already just from scanning through and reading some of the first few chapters, it's amazing. So
I think it's gonna inspire a lot of people.
Awesome.
It's gonna help a lot of people.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Make sure to catch us every Tuesday by subscribing to our channel.
Let us know in the comments below how you make life worth living. We're sure you have lots of great tips to share, and by working together, we can all thrive. I have it memorized.
She's good. I think that's gonna be good. One more time, let's do it again.
The speed needs to be a little bit faster. Can you make it a little bit faster?
No, I think it's better that way. We'd like to thank Anaheim Stone for making this show possible. Nothing says luxury like enhancing your surroundings with natural quality stone.
Master Toddy LA Training Center offers authentic Muay Thai training with locations in Bangkok, Pomona, and Anaheim. For more information, visit mastertoddyla.com.